Hey, Katie. We have the clue of the tapping heels. We are on chapter 6, The Secret Room. The three girls quickly went through all the first floor rooms, opening closet doors along the way. No one was hiding, and there were no visible footprints or fingerprints to indicate that anyone from the outside had sneaked in. The tapping must have come from the second floor, Nancy whispered. I wonder if Miss Carter heard it or if she's asleep. Bess and George went up the back stairway to the second floor, while Nancy took the front. Each bedroom was investigated, but there was not a sign of an intruder. Finally, they arrived at Miss Carter's closed door. No sound came from within. Even if she's asleep, I think we should wake her up, Nancy said. She knocked, and in a few seconds, the actress's sleepy voice called, Come in. She was still in bed. At once, Nancy apologized for having wakened her. We heard tapping sounds in the house. Were you knocking on the wall? No, my dear. Did you hear the tapping sounds? George asked the actress. Miss Carter gave the girl a most engaging smile. When I nap, I'm practically unconscious, she replied. Bess said feelingly, Please go back to sleep. When you wake up, I'll bring you tea and cookies. That's very sweet of you, Miss Carter said. The girls retreated and closed the door. In the hall, Nancy reminded her friends that the tapper might have been up on the third floor, but had come down and escaped from the house before they had left Miss Carter's room. They went up to the attic and walked around. Nothing here, George said. Maybe not, Nancy replied, but somebody has been in this attic. How do you know? Bess spoke up. That chest has been moved, Nancy answered. I'm positive it was over here before. The girls shifted several other objects, hoping to find a clue to the mystery, but they saw no trace of a trap door or loose boards. Okay, I guess it's back to the basement, George said. Okay, Nancy? Okay. When they reached the basement, Nancy stood in the center of the floor and slowly turned in circles. Bess and George watched their friend in fascination. They knew enough not to ask what was going through her mind. Presently, Nancy stopped turning and walked over to the rear wall of the basement. She tapped on the panels. Girls, she said, do you realize that this basement is not so large as the first floor of the house? I hadn't noticed, Bess replied. But what you say isn't unusual, is it? Lots of people have a small cellar compared to the size of their house. Suddenly Nancy said, Wait here. She dashed up the stairs and outdoors. The young sleuth walked round and round the house, examining the foundation. Finally, she went back to the basement and beamed her flashlight inch by inch along the rear wall. What do you suspect? George finally asked, curiosity getting the better of her. An opening in this wall, Nancy answered. Suppose you girls start at the other end and hunt for a clue. Just before they all reached the center of the wall, Bess exclaimed, Here's a place that looks as if a gnat or rat has gnawed on it. Nancy studied the edge of the beveled board. She tried pulling it forward with her fingernails. Though it moved a fraction of an inch, she could not budge it any farther. George was already looking around for a tool and found one made of steel with a hooked end. It was lying on a shelf above the panel. She inserted the hook in the gouged out spot. Be careful, Bess warned. We don't know what may be hidden behind that wood. Some hidden object could shoot out and harm us. George had dug the hook deep into the wood, and with Nancy's help, the panel began to move. When it was turned at right angles to the wall, Nancy shone her flashlight beyond. The three girls gasped. Before them was a fully furnished bedroom. The bed has been slept in recently, Bess exclaimed. It's a secret room, Nancy cried out. Oh, girls, this is a wonderful clue. There was a switch just inside the movable panel which illuminated 3 lamps. An open door to one side revealed a fully furnished bathroom. Nancy hurried inside and felt a towel and washcloth. They're damp, she called. Someone has been here very recently. I'm sure this is the hideout of the tapper. And here's his razor, George said, rushing in. Bess admitted that she was frightened. "The intruder certainly has a key to this house," she declared. "I think all the locks should be changed at once." Nancy agreed. Bess offered to go tell Miss Carter, even if she had to waken her again. "And I'll attend to getting a locksmith to come here this very afternoon," she added. After Bess had left, Nancy and George searched the small bedroom for clues to the identity of the occupant. There was a cot, and along one wall stood a highboy. I think that's a type of, a chest of drawers. On another was a series of cupboards that reached from the floor to the ceiling. One had a grill metal in front, but the others were of solid wood. All the doors were locked. The girls opened the highboy drawers, but found nothing inside. George stared at the cupboards. "I sure wish we could get a look inside." "I wonder," said Nancy, "if by any chance that pudgy man lives in this room and the key he dropped might open these cupboards. I'll get it." She went upstairs and took the key from her purse. Nancy was back in a few minutes and inserted the key in the lock. "It fits!" she exclaimed. One by one the cupboards were opened. There were several books in one. The other held boxes of letters and other papers. "These are all addressed to William Woonton at this address," Nancy said, after examining several. "And here's a diary," George spoke up, lifting a book from underneath a pile of papers. "It says, 'Diary of Gus Woonton.'" The girls began to turn the leaves of the diary. The notations were startling. They told of Gus Woonton being kept prisoner in the windowless room with only a small duct in the ceiling for fresh air. One item read, "This is the work of my crazy guardians who are taking care of me while my parents are traveling for a year. My guardians declare I'm crazy and have to be locked up, but it is the other way around. But I'll get square with them. Every time they let me out of here, I'll take—" The sentence was not finished, and though the girls scanned the book thoroughly, they could find no clue as to how Gus was getting square with his guardians or what he planned to take. "Do you suppose," said George, "that the pudgy man could be Gus Woonton, and he's the tapper?" "Anything is possible," Nancy replied. "I wonder where he goes when he isn't in this room." Without waiting for a response from George, she went on, "I guess we'd better lock this cupboard and close that panel into the other part of the basement." She chuckled. "Poor Gus. When he comes here for another night's sleep, he won't be able to get in." "Why not?" George asked. "He can use the same hook he always does." Nancy smiled. "We'll take the key and the tool upstairs and hide them. I suppose this room is where the tapper hides. Now maybe we or the police will be able to nab him." George and Nancy went to Miss Carter's room. Mrs. Beeling had returned. Both women were astounded at the discovery the girl detectives had made. But Miss Carter could throw no light on Gus Woonton or his parents or guardians. "I'll call my lawyer, Carl Amberson, at once and ask him who owned this house before the Smiths did," she said. The girls were near the phone and could hear Mr. Amberson's voice clearly. Not only was he surprised at the strange happenings, but said that the William Woontons had indeed owned the house at one time. "I did not know they had a son Gus, and I have no idea where they might be. I'll try to find out, though, and let you know." After Miss Carter finished speaking with Mr. Amberson, Nancy asked permission to turn this part of the mystery over to her father. "He's traced many lost persons," she said. The actress agreed, and Nancy telephoned Mr. Drew. He, too, was amazed at the turn of events and promised to do what he could. A few minutes later, Bess arrived with the locksmith. The man worked for over an hour to change all the locks, including those in the garage, then went off. "Now I feel safer," Bess said with a sigh as she turned over the keys to Miss Carter. They were about to start preparations for dinner when the telephone rang. Mr. Drew was calling Nancy. "I have some very important information for you," he said, "and I think you'd better come home as soon as possible, and be sure to bring the diary and the cupboard key with you." And that's the end of chapter 6. We'll have to see what happens.